Hollow Knight Silksong is here, and for those who have been fans of the series, it's been a long 7 years. For those new to the series, you might wonder why so many people are obsessed with these hand-drawn Metroidvanias. I'm here to give you an honest review deep within Farloom. Is this game all hype, or the next indie masterpiece? Hi, my name is Dove and I love indie video games, and I'm here with the rest of the team from The Gamer Buff to give you a deeper insight into the latest installment from Team Cherry, Hollow Knight Silksong. Quick bit of housekeeping here, Jefferson will be co-writing this one with me, mainly because the game is massive and we wanted to make sure we got as much information for our viewers as possible, but also to give different perspectives. I hated the original Hollow Knight the first couple of times I played it. But after a few years of cooling off and finally falling in love with the Souls-like style of game, and Carp's sheer love and enjoyment of the game infecting me, I gave it a third try. Jefferson is one of those nuts who somehow has a percentage over 100 for the game. He loves the game down to the core. In fact, he made a video about the journey Team Cherry took on its way to create Silksong, so go check that out if you're interested. So, from a late convert to a completionist lore-loving nutbag, you have a bit of a spectrum of perspectives. And lastly, while we wanted to give a more detailed review than other videos we've seen out there, we don't want to spoil too much. So in that spirit, we will limit any spoilers and keep all footage to the first act of the game.
Silksong takes place sometime after the events of Hollow Knight. Hornet is kidnapped from Hollow Nest and brought to Farloom, a distant kingdom built on pilgrimage, ritual, and faith. Farloom itself is a fascinating contrast. Where Hollow Nest was about decay and void, Farloom is about silk and song. Hornet's identity as a half-weaver ties directly into the world, where threads can both bind and corrupt. As for when exactly it happens, the timeline is deliberately ambiguous. Team Cherry has said no Hollow Knight ending is strictly canon, so Silksong is designed to follow regardless of which ending you saw. That means that you're exploring a brand new kingdom that still echoes Hollow Nest's themes of corruption, sacrifice, and mystery, but without locking players into one version of the past. It's familiar, but it's also a clean slate.
The original Hollow Knight had some of the best controls for a platformer out there, and Silksong, while similar, shook things up enough to make Hornet control in her own way. Not quite the shift from Metal Gear Solid to Metal Gear 2, but two major changes are the ability to run and the downward attack. The first Hollow Knight had a straight down or pogo attack, but Hornet, being Hornet, now attacks at a 45-degree angle, being a lot more risk and reward type of thing. Aerial combat has to be more strategic right out of the gate now. It will force most gamers to be precise with each downward lunge, because if you just ever so slightly lean in the wrong direction, you can leave yourself wide open in a fight. You are able to change that later on, but you will have to find the right upgrade or crest. More on that later though. Astonishingly to me, the purist Karpinski, he absolutely is in love with the sprinting and flipping and the combat abilities. As for me, a gamer who took a while to get into the first, I enjoyed the fast-paced combat of Silksong. While you can sit there and still kind of take your time like the first one if you want, there are a number of enemy gauntlets where you'll have to kind of adapt as you take on a whole slew of enemies. In addition, Hornet can go from a lunge on the ground to some awesome aerial hits. The run and lunge maneuver can leave you vulnerable to contact damage, however, so, use with caution. Another crucial aspect of the game, especially in Metroidvanias, is the map system. Not only is the layout of the land that you have to explore absolutely humongous in Silksong, but there are just so many nooks and crannies that aren't on the map at all. It just always feels like true exploration anytime you knock down a wall or find a pathway that's not on the map. Now, as the game is about discovering that very map, I don't want to spoil anything. Let's just say the final map dwarfs many from the genre, including its series predecessor. Early estimates for Silksong have the map nearly twice the size of the original. And it's not just the overall scope of the map, but each area is more densely packed than the original as well. And with that comes a lot more art and musical movements from each section of the map. Just like the original, each area has its own feel, sound effect, enemies, and of course soundtrack. But let's have Carps talk more on that.
Let's talk about the audio in Silksong. Christopher Larkin is back, and the Silksong soundtrack is massive. Over 50 tracks. It's nearly double what we had in Hollow Knight. The music actually feels bigger, it feels bolder. You've got sweeping strings, brass, even choral layers that really push boss fights into dramatic territory. But it's not all bombast. Quieter pieces like Bone Bottom and the Marrow bring back that eerie, ambient melancholy that made Hollow Nest so haunting. Sound design also takes a step up, and it's really one of the best things about Silksong. Hornet's needle and silk, they crack with sharp, precise audio cues. Every dash, every leap, every strike has weight. Environments are layered with subtle details like dripping water, wind, insect calls that make Farloom feel very much alive. The result is a soundscape that's more dynamic and varied than Hollow Knight. Now, at times it risks being too dramatic, but it undeniably makes every battle, every moment, feel important.
When it comes to the art style, it's more beautifully handcrafted characters and layer upon layer of gorgeous, meticulously designed backgrounds, each with their own distinct color scheme that all ties together with the overall artistic theme. It starts with the very character. The original Knight was plain and black and white, whereas Hornet absolutely pops with her brilliant red cloak. While the levels and characters still mainly live in that earth tone color palette, through your travels from the retina-piercing greens of Moss Grotto to the brilliant reds that thrive in Hunter's March, when you hit those bright levels, the colors absolutely pop. Now, perhaps one of the best parts, at least for this gamer, is the agency you have to finish the game. What I mean is that there are a number of different routes you can take to complete not only the game, but even just the acts themselves. For example, Carps and I actually finished Act 1 with 2 completely different routes and bosses. Not only did we take different paths, but our tool sets, relics, crests are vastly different, just giving this game another layer of replayability. When it comes to character builds, Silksong again builds upon its predecessor. This is another area Carps and myself are split though. Ditching the all-encompassing notch system for a more varied crest and tool system isn't for everyone. Rather than have a general notch and charm system which allowed for any combination as long as you had enough notches, the crest system almost forces certain builds. Now, in Silksong, you'll stumble upon different crests, which act as different attack sets for Hornet. This is where gamers can ditch the new diagonal downward attack for the classic downward pogo strike, if you can find the Wanderer's crest, of course. The first act has a few different options, including one variation that changes the binding heal to a fury state, which ups Hornet's damage while each hit to enemies restores her health. Along with the different attacks, the crests have different tool and relic setups within them. So for instance, the Hunter's crest leans more towards your attack and aggressiveness. You'll have to upgrade if you want to wield your compass along with some of your quick throws. There are all kinds of trade-offs for the crest, so experiment and try to figure out what works for you. But along with unlocking more tool slots on each crest, you can upgrade their base stats if you can find the right weaver. Ultimately, this change-up brings a whole new level of character customization and a trove of replayability. And for a gamer who was kind of bored with the original notch system, this was a thoughtful and strategic upgrade to that system. But for the more purist player like Carps, he doesn't seem to love it. To quote him, "I'm not crazy about the crest system. I haven't totally put to use all the tools and such because of it. Fair or not, everything in this game is going to be compared to Hollow Knight, and it's just not the same as the notch and charm system." Now, the elephant in the room is the difficulty. Is this game harder than the original? I honestly think that just depends on the type of gamer you ask. At the end of the day, Carps and myself are close on overall skill when it comes to these kind of games, and in bosses that I struggle with for hours, he has little problem with, and vice versa. There are bosses he has to take his time on, and I can get through in a couple goes. My point being that what's difficult for some gamers isn't for others. Speaking from the average player, though, I believe that this game is definitely more difficult than the original. There's more bosses, 40 as opposed to 30, more platforming as the map is twice as big, and even if all the enemies had the same difficulty, it would be more difficult to get through just because it's a longer game. Early completion times are averaging anywhere from 30 to 50 hours, and I can tell you if you suck like I do, it's probably going to be double that. But on top of all that, I honestly believe that Silksong has you dive into some more difficult bosses right off the bat. In fact, their first update that Team Cherry posted actually kind of nerfed some of the more trying bosses that beginners were having some trouble with, namely Morwing and Sister Splinter. In addition to the bosses being a bit more trying and the game being a bit longer, the economy is also more stingy than the original. If you're not careful with your currency, you might find yourself at a bench location but without the means to activate it. I found myself having to skip a lot of benches until I could circle back when I finally had enough cash. But again, the recent patch alleviated some of the early tolls on the benches, but it's still more challenging than the original game. Perhaps the only trade-off with that stingy economy would be the ease of finding maps. Nearly every section you'll be able to find either a map holder or a person who will sell you the map very early on. Jefferson felt a bit differently, and I quote, "It's challenging, almost too challenging at times, but that frustration leads to such euphoria when you finally beat a particular challenge, and that's a feeling I don't think you can get elsewhere." So, as a Hollow Knight purist, you can see Jefferson prefers some of the old mechanics like that of the charm and notch system. But to quote Carps, it does not disappoint. It's an amazing game, a total worthy sequel that stands on its own as a badass classic. As for myself, a gamer who had to come back to the original game not once, but 2 different times spanning across 5 years, I believe that Silksong is an indie masterpiece. It didn't step on the toes of the original. It built and evolved in a lot of different areas while still always giving you that Hollow Knight feel. For the purists who need everything to be just like the original, Silksong might just be a little too different from that. But for anyone who's looking for a great challenge in an absolutely gorgeous, handcrafted world filled with unique characters, a brilliant soundtrack, and some of the most satisfying, fast-paced yet thoughtful style combat, then I cannot recommend Hollow Knight Silksong enough. From the exploration to the vast amount of different paths you can take and stories you can uncover, this has been one of the most enjoyable games I have played. At its base price, Hollow Knight Silksong is selling at $19.99. And with playtime starting at 30 hours ranging to over 50, I think you get more than enough value from this one. So, if you're interested, check out Hollow Knight Silksong, available on PC, the Switches, PlayStations, and Xboxes. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to hit the like button. And subscribing goes a long way towards bringing you more content like this. We also have a weekly news podcast called the Indie Radar, where we focus on indie news and upcoming titles. Thanks again for watching from all of us here at The Gamer Buff.
Mm-hmm.